All right. Return to sport decision making. This one's near and dear to my heart. I'm excited to talk about this. So my name's Colton T. I'm a physical therapist and a board certified sports clinical specialist in Montrose, Colorado. Today we're going to talk about return to sport decision making and why we need to get away from using time as a deciding factor. As clinicians, we're tasked with making sure athletes return back to sport safely and successfully, but if you look at the data, we're just not that successful at it. We've got four main objectives today. The first is identifying limitations in the current return to sport models. Then we're identifying and describing the 5 domains of return to sport readiness. Next, we're going to be able to interpret the return to sport challenges through a case study example. And then we're going to recognize holes in the current research and discuss opportunities for new research. This slide highlights the main problems in sports rehab today. Despite advances in surgery and rehab, re-injury rates remain alarmingly high, while the chances of returning to high-level competition remain low. Only about 50% of college athletes will return to their previous level of competition after surgery. That is insane. Only 1 in 2 will get back to the level they were playing at before. And depending on the source that you look at, re-injury rates can be as high as 30 to 40% after an ACL reconstruction. And here's the part that really catches my attention. The younger you are, the more likely you are to have a poor outcome. This is contradictory to what we might think because younger people tend to heal faster and gain strength easier, but that's just not what's happening. This chart comes from a systematic review that pulled over 7,000 abstracts down to a final set of studies. The overall ACL injury rate across all athletes was 15%, split between a 7% ipsilateral and an 8% contralateral injury rate. When you isolate for age alone, athletes younger than 25 had a 21% secondary injury rate. Athletes who returned to sport, regardless of age, also sat at 20%. And when you combine younger age with return to sport, that risk climbs to 23%. What's striking is that the author specifically flagged cutting and pivoting sports like soccer as the highest risk category, where participation is increasing exponentially across the country. So why are their numbers so bad? Historically, we've relied on time-based models. Once you hit 6 months, the tissue should be healed, you are good to go. But time doesn't reflect strength recovery, neuromuscular control, and most importantly, psychological readiness. So the field shifted towards a criterion-based model. You achieve A before you can move on to B. This has definitely been better, but there's still gaps. There's no real standardization for how and when someone should be tested, what criterion should be using, right? They're all over the place. And athletes heal at different rates. Treating them all in the same criteria, same timeline, just leaves them at risk for failure. Here's the key message of today's talk. Return to sport decisions can't rely on 1 or 2 factors. We need a multifactorial model that considers strength and power, yes, but also psychological readiness, the specific demands of the athlete's sport, and the context that we're returning into. Biological healing is still important, but each of these domains independently influence injury risk. I'm going to walk through each of the 5 domains, and then we'll apply them to a real case study. I really like this model because it simplifies the decision-making process, especially for newer or less experienced clinicians. It separates each of the different domains, and then within each domain, you have benchmarks that should be achieved before they return to sport. As we go through each one, pay close attention to psychological readiness and the contextual factors. Those are the two that get overlooked the most. All right, physical capacity. This is the one that people think about the most with return to sport. Strength, symmetry, hop testing, all the fun, exciting exercises. They're all important, but there's still variability in how we measure it. Are we using isokinetic testing? Do we each have access to a biodex? Functional hop tests, are we doing them the same? Are we measuring movement quality or just raw output numbers? Have you ever actually watched a functional hop test and thought, this person has more movement compensations than a toddler avoiding bedtime, yet the clinician still clears them for a sport? It's quite variable all over. Quad strength deficit greater than 10% or asymmetry in hop testing has been linked to higher re-injury rates. But here's the key point. These metrics are necessary, but not sufficient on their own. Psychological readiness. This domain, as mentioned before, is often overlooked. Athletes may pass all their physical tests, but when you look at them, they hesitate during a game movement or avoid certain movements altogether. Tools like the ACL RSI help quantify this. Scores below 60 have been associated with delayed or failed returns. If people go back hesitant, they are more likely to get hurt. We also need to watch for behavioral signs like altered movement patterns under pressure or with fatigue and address fear of re-injury early. Sport-specific demands. Strength in the clinic does not always translate to readiness for actual chaos of sport. We tend to run every athlete through the same hop test battery because it's validated and we've all been taught that. But that doesn't necessarily apply across every sport. Think about the differences between golf and soccer. Those demands are completely different, and our test should reflect that. Contextual and external factors. Now, we need to consider the context around the athlete. Are they in midseason or off-season? Is there pressure from coaches, teammates, or parents? Are they a high school senior hoping to get back for a scholarship? These factors often drive premature returns, and as clinician, it is our duty to help them navigate them thoughtfully while advocating for the athlete's long-term well-being. Finally, the fifth one is biological surgical considerations. Healing timelines still matter. We can't rush the biology. Graft type, if there's meniscus repairs, and surgical protocols all impact when it's safe to progress. Some athletes feel ready, but their tissue isn't. Understanding healing timelines helps us balance subjective readiness and objective healing and ensures we're not overloading structures too soon. So before we move on to the case, I just want everybody to take a second and think. In your own clinical experience, or if you've not been in the clinic, think ahead. Which of the 5 domains do you think gets missed most often? Let's just sit for a second and think about it. As I've talked about, psychological readiness and contextual factors are the ones that are missed because they're not right in front of us. That's not easily seen. You can't touch it. So let's see how that plays out in the next scenario. So you're a new clinician and you walk into the clinic early Monday morning and you see a new patient on your schedule. Emily kicks a lot. Her primary PT went on maternity leave and you weren't able to talk to her before she left. Her notes are very detailed, but 2 important pieces of information are missing, lost to an unfortunate printer error. Her dad is here today attending her PT session and hoping you can clear her for her return to sport. So let's just read the case study for a second. So Emily Kixalot is a 17-year-old female, 16 months post-op ACL reconstruction with a hamstring autograft and a medial meniscus repair. She is the starting midfielder aiming to return to preseason at 7 months post-op for her senior year. She is eager to get back on the field for scholarship considerations. Her dad is a coach and consistently attends her PT sessions to check on her progress. When you're reviewing her notes, you notice her rehab milestone that she's already achieved, full range of motion by 10 weeks, quad strength deficit of 20% using a biodex. Her last hop test revealed 82 to 87% limb symmetry index. She does have a valgus collapse on single leg landing, and then there's 2 pieces of information that we just don't know. She has been increasing her endurance with a return to running program with no changes in edema or pain. So I want to pause the video here for just a moment and ask yourself, based on the 5 domains, what do you think is missing from the chart? What would you want to see as a clinician before you answered her dad's request to return her to sport? Okay, so let's look at what we know and what we don't know and map it across our 5 domains. So physical capacity, we have a lot of data here. We have full range of motion. We know what her quad strength is, her hop tests. Sport-specific demands, that's one of the things that's missing. We know she's a midfielder, which is contextual, but we don't know, has she been cutting? Has she been kicking? Has she been sprinting? What change of directions has she already done? We don't know any of that yet. Biologically, she's 7 months post-op with a meniscus tear. So those should have healed, and she doesn't have any changes in edema with running. So that further indicates that the internal joint is doing well. So now let's move on. Here's what's missing. Her ACL RSI score of 54, and she's been performing non-contact agility movements, but is hesitate on cutting drills. So here's what I want to talk about. 4 questions. Is she ready to return to sport? Which domains of readiness are incomplete? As a clinician, this is your first time seeing her. What are your next steps? And how do you handle the pressure from her dad, who's also her coach, to get her back on the field? So let's break into groups and let's talk about this. Okay, let's reason through it together. Her physical numbers look reasonable on the surface, but her ACL RSI score of 54 and hesitancy on cutting drills tells us she's not psychologically ready. The next step is not clearing. She's not ready to go back to the field. It's targeted intervention in those two domains with honest, direct communication with her father and coach about why post-op timelines alone don't clear her for sport. All right, some research that we need to look through. Where does the field go? We need validated multi-domain testing batteries that are sport-specific, not a one-size-fits-all. I think we can do better for different types of sports, different types of ages. We need to study long-term outcomes, not just re-injury rates. We also need to explore how emerging technology, force plates, wearables, real-time movement tracking can sharpen our testing. This is happening now, and I think that is going to be one of the most exciting fields moving forward. We need more research on transition from clinical rehab into actual sports performance. Right now, there's a big gap. They finish physical therapy, and then who's supposed to take them over? Are they still training? Are they working on performance? How can we fill that next gap? Some of that is insurance dependent. Some of that is just what's available in town. I think that's a really exciting piece of research, though. So, key takeaways from today. The return to sport decision makings are complex. The traditional models that we've relied on are no longer enough and they're not good enough. Physical recovery is essential, but it's only one piece. Psychological readiness, sport-specific demands, external pressure, and biological healing timelines all have to be considered. Our role as clinicians is evolving. We need to move away from binary cleared or not cleared mindset toward a continuum-based approach grounded in real data and the athlete's actual goals. I like to tell my athletes they're never done with therapy. They're just moving into more and more advanced stages and then into performance that they'll be doing for the rest of their playing careers. Physical therapists are uniquely positioned to lead this shift. This isn't just about getting athletes back on the field. It's about making sure they come back with confidence, staying healthy, and performing at the best. Here's some of the works cited I used in this presentation today. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know.